Paul McFarlane, Senior Chaplain with New South Wales Ambulance. Welcome to Carpool Conversations.
Thank you. What a great opportunity to go for a drive.
It's good to have you. I'm going to try and keep an eye on the road so we don't have to call one of your colleagues to come and...
That's a good idea.
In your role as a Senior Chaplain for New South Wales Ambulance,
Yes.
you would give a lot of other paramedics support and advice. What would you say to your work colleagues about how best to support their workmates?
But I say to them, their most protective thing that they have is actually the mate sitting next to them in the ambulance as they drive around on a shift. So like we're doing today. They'll talk about all sorts of stuff as they drive around. In doing that, they might go to something that's been fairly difficult and challenging, and after they leave the hospital or leave the scene, it's good to have a bit of a chat about it and just, how are you feeling after that? How are things for you? Is that okay? Those conversations are really important. So I think that's our first line of protection, is just the regular conversations that they have with each other in a car. And I keep saying, don't underestimate the power of just sitting in a car and having a yarn to someone like we're doing today.
So, when you're working with someone all day, you're well positioned to notice a change in them. What sort of changes would you be looking for that might cause you to be concerned about a colleague?
I think what you really got to look for in someone is something that's unusual for them. Now, of course, that's going to be individual for everybody, but changes in their behaviour, changes in their thinking. Generally, if people are under a bit of pressure, they tend to withdraw from their normal friends and social network. So it's kind of ironic, isn't it? When you most need to be around people is when you least tend to be seeking that out.
Yeah.
If things are changing, or if they're saying to you they're not, they're struggling a bit, they're not sleeping so well, they're not eating as much, they're not engaging with the team members back at the station or in the workplace.
Yep.
That's usually a sign something's not quite right. And I think when you have a sense that something's not quite right, that's what I love about the AOK message, is that, just actually say, hey mate, I'm just noticing things are not quite the same for you. How are you going? Are you okay? And
so making that observation.
Making the observation, but then acting on it, I think, is really important. So I think we often notice things in other people, but we don't always act on it. That's the difference. Or we might talk about it with our colleagues, but not with the individual themselves. And so I think the trick is, to be brave enough to say, hey, I've just noticed, or I've been noticing lately, blah, blah, blah. How are you travelling? Are you okay? And my tip is usually around that is be specific when you're saying to them what you notice that's a bit different. Because that actually tells a person that you have genuinely been, you genuinely care about them, you genuinely observe something that's a bit different.
So a lot of people talk about, how do I deal with someone who just flat out denies that there's something wrong, even though that you know that there is?
Yeah, that can be tricky, but I think what you do really is make sure they know that if they do want to talk at some stage, that you're there for them. I think that's the trick.
Yep.
And don't give up. Just check in with them every now and then. Or one thing you can do is say, look, I do care about you. I'm concerned about you. Maybe today's not the day to have a conversation, but could we perhaps have a coffee next week? Grab a drink next week or something and have a bit of a yarn then, and that gives people a little bit of a time to process it and think about it. And in my experience, people may be more inclined with a bit of warning to have that conversation down the track in a safe place. And it needs to be somewhere where it is safe, where you can have that conversation one-on-one, no one's going to hear it.
Yeah.
They know you're confidential, you're not going to share it with people. Those things are really important. So, I think a bit of persistence and just occasional little "are you okay" questions, and showing that you still care even if they don't want to disclose what's going on for them, might build enough trust over time so that they eventually say, actually, no, I'm not doing so well, I'd like to talk to you about it.
As a paramedic, paramedics often deal with with people in crisis at the very pointy end of life.
Yeah.
I think people underestimate the role that the paramedics actually play across the whole spectrum of keeping people safe and well. And mate, an incredible job that you guys do, and a huge amount of respect for your work.
Thank you. They do a great job, and that's why I'm passionate about my role, because I want to keep my paramedics well and send them home to their families every day as well as we can. And that's why we just keep saying, keep talking to your mates, keep encouraging one another, look after each other, and you generally speaking, get through life a lot better.
Mate, thanks so much for joining me.
Well, more than happy to, mate. More than happy to.
Good on you, mate. We'll pull over up here and we might have to refuel.
I think so.